Before you adopt big book doctrine as truth for life, use your own logic and education now before obeying its command to throw away both for a simple fact check. Bill Wilson's readers are told to begin how it works, that honesty, of which many unfortunates that fail his program are incapable, this luck of the draw or selective divine bequest honesty is your primary key to recovery, or not. Too bad. Tough luck. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of rigorous honesty. So Bill tells you that you'll die drunk if you were unlucky to have been born unrecoverably dishonest. A clear form of original, created, inexplicably, selectively inflicted evil. And you're just as dead if you decline to practice his religious worship of the 12 steps. No one, he stresses in several chapters, from this 95% majority of the doomed outside of AA lifelong disciples, the intrinsically immoral and or disobedient, has ever surmounted addiction. I have repeatedly stressed research of the vast history from a myriad true biographies of secular and religious, rational and faith-based, successful recoveries. And I again repeat the total consensus of medicine, psychiatry, and psychology behind the fact that there is no evidence of any partial or permanent human history of either genetically evil or addicted personality and character. Beautifully explaining the millions of recoveries without divine magical intervention. We've got all the tools needed. The 10 to 15% of us driven by a weak dopamine pump to risk of self-poisoning to death often drive that highway to hell for years, but every one of us above, say, IQ 60 is capable of quitting all drugs for good, using any one of widely varied strategies from pure religion to hard science. It is after birth that children and adults, initially blank slates, infinitely capable of good and evil, wisdom and stupidity, become inspired by worldly influences, many for and many against, a range of loving ethics including honesty and kindness, taught by families, schools, and friends and churches. Our decisions to love or neglect do not exclusively come from only the right religion or from genetic favoritism of good or evil tendencies. Unfortunately, these exact myths drive billions of religious fanatics, often very loving ones, but also self-superior bigots who make war to enforce their prejudice. Worst of all are the killers for religion and racism or sectarianism. Just a comment aside from my text here, in no way do I denigrate or reject anyone's religion, no matter how devout, or belief that you are inspired by holiness, divine beauty, and even messaging. I have no problem with any of that. It is quite fascinating that Bill Wilson's, quote, "some are born bad" rule contradicts the religion that he demands precept that all are filled with original sin since Adam bit the apple. Either way, we're told that the one true religion is your only salvation, unless you're one of those constitutionally dishonest, incapable slobs that God made irredeemably evil. Makes you wish Bill had explained why an almighty, loving creator would condemn some or all of his blameless human works to perversion. Huh? Work of the devil? Thought God had all the power. Mythology aside, guess who'd better take over? That's right, you. Anthropology finds 99.5% of our prehistory before technology, organized government, money and property, and tyranny's use of each was utterly absent of war or even individual murder weapon hacked skeletons, despite hundreds of thousands of years of savage big game hunting weapons availability. When you know your history, you understand we're all born potentially good. For 2 million years, hunters left their animal-killing aggression behind, went back with their families, because evolving, strengthening, maternal love gave everyone the happy morale to fortify the hearth and prepare together for mortal threats fatal without loving collaboration. Even those modern murdering sociopaths were not around before agriculture and politics quite suddenly invented homicide and war. Evil, then, is 100% human environmental and 0% devil or God arranged. And again, why would an all-powerful, loving God who made us all in his image then rip his ethical, honest beauty away from some of us in the womb? Wouldn't that evil idiocy instead be some priest's story and scheme to spread fear and collect tithes? And is this not the same evil, false idea that vast portions of humanity are born subhuman or inferior, guilty, evil, dishonest, to thus deserve and require punishment and death? This violent, lying bigotry also driving virtually all hatred and war, and cementing our failure to allow or achieve God's plan for our loving, human, equal civilization. After Bill's conversion, he forgot his own education, which had to include reports that millions of criminals who lied their way from horribly taught childhoods through decades of crime finally found in significant numbers, inspired by themselves, their families, and religious leaders, restored ethics, guiding them to both temperance before AA and kind, honest treatment of others. They were able to renew and rebuild their loving character, because at their bottom they realized that they and many others could not any longer survive without their own love in action. While some addicts and criminals found this recovery from new obedience to a particular religion, many more were even more motivated by their hurting, beseeched families. They finally sensed, even through the deepening fog of their addictions and criminal habits, and then they were 1,000 times more acutely inspired once they began true withdrawal from drugged, criminal, evil folly. Even more conclusive for many was the revelation of their own desperate interest in survival and even happiness only achieved by acting smart and sober for better consequences. This emergency response, akin to fight or flight, is everyone's genetic trait and potential, and the secret for our ability to reverse ourselves and reform. Have you noticed that these same fabulous family and self-interest insights are not Bill Wilson's serve God and his flock to be converted only dogma entirely fill every 50-minute AA traveling personal storyteller's speech? They all tell us how I learned to think and live, not how I learned to pray, serve, and obey. Mindful of Bill Wilson's cold, baseless rejection and condemnation of the giant majority of addicts supposedly incapable of either honesty or certainly of his ultimate religion, ask yourself if his big book sticks to either truth or honesty, or occasionally slips into prejudice, propaganda, and outright fantasy. Some of us, Mr. Wilson goes on, tend to hold to our old ideas, clearly meaning any independent, personal, assertive ideas contrary to his, which speak for God's. And the result for recovery was nil until we let go absolutely. All other cults, by the way, also brainwash you entirely of all your own mind of ideas, emptying your pretty little head for theirs exclusively. Clever scheme, this, because if allowed to use your knowledge and thinking to evaluate theirs, those magnificent claims might lose their singular, unimpeachable authority. It just wouldn't do for you to independently assess the emperor's clothes, or if he's actually wearing any at all. Of course, in our every conversation, you never stop practicing your power cure from addiction, constantly confronting and evaluating your emperor of addiction to see through his magnificent regalia with your own higher mind's X-ray eyes of love, truth, and beauty. To all evidence, blank, blind dependence brings relapse far more often than lifelong personal therapy, strength, and self-determined abstinence. Later, I will note that a 40-year recovered priest, Father Bill, describes your higher power not as only an authoritarian God, but as your own higher mind that you keep filling, honing, and using with love and truth, yours and his. Back to the big book. We are dealing, says the big book, with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help, meaning only his exact directions, his doctrine, sponsors, and God's takeover of your thoughts, actions, and entire life. Alcohol and drugs are too much for us. But there is one who has all the power. He gave you none, and that is God. May you find him now. You and I have spent hours describing all that human power that certainly could be inspired by divine talent God designed in us all, available by our thought and action, not just prayer to and worship of him. The history of millions of hopelessly, horribly behaved addicts, with and without religious supervision, recovering by their own thoughtful efforts, proves that virtually all of us, not just a lucky, tiny, morally talented fraction, have enough good, youthful, family, socialized, civilized influences to always retain our power to recover ethics and mental health we had before but lost during addiction. Especially us genetic addicts whose chemical weakness caused our moral collapse and not vice versa. Bill lived decades into an era of multidisciplinary addiction recovery, featuring millions of agnostics and atheists getting quite well without constant new orders from an external, manipulating by the hour God. But his big book revisions never retreated from that, quote, "probably no human power exists" nonsense. Did not God design human families to provide an early foundation of love from our parents, including enough practice of rationality and self-discipline to again rebuild our divine and human power, beginning that desperately, magnificently seized first day of sobriety, our power to overmaster chemical illness? No one can deny, without insulting our intelligence and ignoring our history, that committing to abstinence, reason, and love will cure you and please God, whether you pray to, worship, hear, and obey His heavenly voice or not. I was 50 years sick, and I found my power. No human power, my tushy. The 12 steps repeatedly tell us that we can find a God of our understanding, but dropping the other shoe, only that 100% minute-by-minute heavenly dictator of all you think and do, since you've agreed to throw away your own thoughts and decisions forever. Baited with the flexible any power outside of you, even a doorknob, we're then switched to precisely the iron-bound, almighty dictator of Bill's understanding, that you, without any allowed power or mentality, cannot possibly understand, but damn well better obey. If you just take Bill Wilson at his own word, but adding the thoughtful evaluation he tells you to avoid, your incredulity is far more likely than your acceptance, unless your religious Christian doctrine and unquestioning acceptance are uncommonly devout. His book, if not most of his broader-minded followers, demands the "God is all, I am nothing" dogma. Your useful question, before meekly agreeing that a giant portion of humanity can never be honest, wise, or beat addiction, should be, I wonder if Bill Wilson was intrinsically honest before or after he announced, "I got religion," and proceeded to sell his beliefs as the only way to avoid drugs. How could he have been unaware that every one of his hundreds of example stories told of only of good, honest people, then poisoned in body, mind, and ethics? Read that big book, every one of those stories, with not one example to back his bizarre claim that multitudes are too originally bad to ever accept or implement his moral religious solution. I repeat, no one has ever expressly denied, knowing it would insult our intelligence, that commitment to abstinence, reason, and love can cure you and please God, whether you pray to, worship, hear, and obey His heavenly voice or not. Bill massages your deeper doubts of your basic worth and potential within and between every line he writes. So I hope you'll recall, appreciate, and use our constant theme. It is only and always your full use, retention, growth, and practice of your ideas, strong and weak, past, present, and future, that can and will gain and keep your recovery. God enriches your mind and decisions. He does not wipe out, replace, and dictate them. Lately, my rehab passions got so out of control that I began harassing my teachers with my own lesson plans. For example, if we never train ourselves not to, we relapse when our unpracticed mind grows weak and rusty. Never mind how strong and wise became our perfect person purposes, y'all never stop hammering. Finally, one day, a drugging idea shoots through a dozen broken brain gates to fly all the way out to our poison-seizing fingers. I'm not qualified or interested to guide the usual chats about fixing 1,000 things about ourselves except the drug or don't drug internal argument that 100% effective teacher would steer you to perform. Don't you know that finally, only often staged, practiced skill at that achieves lifelong abstinence, just as neglect to promote this rehearsed power ensures nearly certain relapse. Don't you know that simple poisoning or not is not only wholly determined by drug dirty versus clean thought power competition, but then who of the two in you wins determines 100% of every other lovely goal's outcome you guys are forever sidetracked chasing. Since permanent abstinence is well known to teach us 99% of that stuff anyway, can't we just get cracking on the single skill that really saves your life? How to say no to drugs. Hello? I'm ready to lead one little half class on direct, not indirect sobriety. First, I'll hit them with Frodo versus Gollum. Now, class, Chair 1 comes up with a proposal to drug now, giving a tasty, compelling reason why I can't do without that chemical fling. The next person argues with that reason why it's stupid. Disaster will result and hell no, I won't do it. Person 3 is the beast again, with another urgent need and slick excuse. As usual, half truth, half bullshit. Person 4 might think of some joy of life rewards, not pain of death fears, to reject the beast's latest lure. Around the room, the war rages, straight from our life histories of our strength and wisdom versus our weakness and stupidity. One moderator chalkboards the entire arsenal of weapons deployed by either side or simply tapes it for transcription. Each class then becomes a written chapter for everyone's permanent notebook. Twice a year, students are assigned to write and perform a detailed war of their own. We don't mess around. We're gonna live and love till our teeth and marbles fall out. Regular little patches of this work should last a lifetime. The bicycle you learn to ride is how to nail that worst, most clever threat with 1,000 times stronger rhetoric to wreck it. Don't you remember all your relapses? The beastie said, I got the last word, so you shut up. And you did. Do I ever shut up? Spare me the cracks. Will I ever fall off my bike or wagon or forget how to ride it? I don't think so. Your beastie arguments are usually pretty short, fairly slick, but unintelligent, uneloquent, and full of holes. It's tempting and reassuring to just quietly kick the critter out of sight. And most of the time, this is just what you need to and should do. A wonderful, strong, safe recovery evolution. The beast takes the same approach, hoping to slam a drug into you so fast you have no time to muster your troops. This is exactly why you must, at intervals, keep it standing and swinging while you batter it bloody for 10 rounds. For years to come, it has another 1,000 punches for you, so forget those first-round knockouts and train to go the distance. If you remember my play, make your wise, loving, human evaluation and decision center sing out loud with passion, logic, history, future, anger, joy, fear, and love. Bits and pieces of this human power, beauty, and conflict flit through most AA and rehab talks, but folks never concentrate and focus on our unstoppable until one side wins, then ever renewed war inside. If this was our first, not our 83rd priority, we'd mostly recover forever and relapse never. This one war is the essence of addiction or recovery. Declare it. Fight it. You will win. Always. When your beast and you both battle at full effort and capacity, every bit of human knowledge we've traded ensures that our higher, stronger, biggest brain and richest love powers lifelong victory.